This video is an introduction to the GMAT, the Graduate Management Admissions Test. The GMAT, of course, is the exam that's required for admission to most MBA programs, and it's written by the GMAC, the Graduate Management Admissions Council. They're a group of business schools that get together for the purpose of writing the exam in order to standardize admissions to MBA programs. As of last year, there were about 250,000 people taking the exam each year. Of that number, 150,000 were American, that's about 60%. And a recent trend has been a growing number of international students taking the exam. Okay, so the content of the exam itself, it's the same for every exam. It begins with the writing section, the analytical writing assessment. And that is two 30-minute essays that must be written, and they give you a basic word processor in order to do that. That's followed by the quantitative section, which is the math section. And that's going to be 37 questions for which you get 75 minutes. There's two types of questions on the math section: problem solving and data sufficiency questions. And data sufficiency is a unique question type which is found only on the GMAT. And that's usually an area where people's scores can go up dramatically as a result of study and preparation. After the math section is the verbal section, and that's going to be 41 questions for which you also have 75 minutes. In the verbal section, you'll encounter three types of questions: reading comprehension, critical reasoning, and sentence correction. The format of the exam. The exam itself is a computer adaptive test, which means it is taken on a computer using a piece of software. The software itself constantly adjusts the difficulty level of the questions that you're given. And as a result, everyone gets a different exam. So the first question that you get is going to be a medium difficulty question, which is drawn from a pool of about 10 initial questions. So everyone is going to get a question of about 500 level difficulty, but the person taking the exam next to you may get a different initial question than you. Your scratch work on the GMAT, since it's taken on a computer, must be done separately. And you're actually given at the test center a little erasable note board, which you have to use to do your scratch work. In order to practice using the software that you'll see on the GMAT has provided free software, which is available online at mba.com. And that software is called GMAT Prep. And that includes two free full-length GMAT exams. The scoring. To begin with, the first section, the writing section, you get a score from 1 to 6, with 6 being the highest. So that's for the two essays that you have to write at the beginning of the exam. You're scored from 1 to 6, and that's separate from your other score on the exam. The quantitative and verbal section give a combined score between 200 and 800. So usually when you ask people what they got on the GMAT, and they say, I got a 640 or I got a 570, that's their combined score of the quantitative and verbal section. The median score, as of 2006, is 540, and that also has been going up in recent years. About 10 years ago, it was 500, so that has been increasing gradually. At the exam center, you get an unofficial score report right away, and that's going to give you your score from the quantitative and verbal section. You'll have to wait about 2 weeks to get your score on the writing section, because that has to be graded separately. Okay, basic strategies for the GMAT. First of all, if you decide you want to take the exam, you should start by establishing your personal scoring goals. And that's going to come from knowing which schools you're going to apply to. You're going to want to find out what is the average GMAT score for the school that you're applying to. Also, find out whether they have scholarships for getting a higher GMAT score. Also, some schools, as I'm going to discuss, have a minimum GMAT score, a minimum score that you must get in order to be considered for admission. If you're going to be applying to a top MBA school, and that's going to be a top 30 school, you should give yourself at least 2 months to prepare for the exam. Because the GMAT, above all else, tests familiarity and repetition. That is, you have to know the content of the exam. And that's going to be most evident on the math section. You really have to know the content cold in order to get a high score on the math section. And that's why you have to give yourself sufficient time to prepare. When taking the exam, you must finish every question on each section. The key phrase here is that guessing is bad, but not finishing is worse. So if you're getting towards the end of a section, let's say you're near the end of the math section and you're on question 33 and you only have 3 minutes left, you have to move rapidly through the remaining questions and make an educated guess, because it's critical to finish every question. Timing is in fact among the most difficult problem areas for people on the GMAT, especially on the math section. It can be very hard, at least initially, to finish every question on the math, even if you know the content. And again, that's why it's so important to put in sufficient time studying and preparing. Okay, average GMAT scores. For the top MBA programs, and those are, I'm taking these rankings from businessweek.com. Top schools, top 15, the mean GMAT score is about 710. That goes for Harvard, Wharton, University of Chicago, MIT. All of the top 15 scores, the mean GMAT score is about 710. For all of the top 30 schools, the mean GMAT is about 680, or it's at least 680. So there's really not much of a drop-off if you're applying to Harvard or if you're applying to NYU. You still need a very high GMAT score. These rankings are available at businessweek.com. For good, smaller local schools, they will generally have a mean GMAT score of about 600. For instance, I'm in the San Diego area. The University of San Diego has a mean GMAT score of 620. San Diego State University, which is also a well-known school in the San Diego area, that has a mean GMAT score of 610. And some schools may have a minimum GMAT requirement. For instance, San Diego State University has a minimum GMAT of 520. Some schools may offer scholarships for getting a higher GMAT score. So that's certainly something you're going to want to research as you apply for your MBA.